Welcome back to Stories That Heal. What starts as a routine traffic stop takes a shocking turn in today's story. A powerful tale of resilience, accountability, and unexpected twists. An ordinary encounter becomes a fight for respect and justice, proving how strength and composure can flip the script on abuse of power. If you love stories that reveal deeper truths and inspire change, hit subscribe and join us as we unpack this unforgettable moment. Let's get started. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow across the quiet suburban street as Tasha Williams drove her unassuming sedan home. It had been a long day, filled with tense meetings and exhaustive paperwork at the FBI office. Dressed casually in jeans and a sweatshirt, she looked like any other driver headed home after work. Her car, with out-of-state plates, cruised steadily, blending into the evening's light traffic. She was almost on autopilot, her mind replaying the details of the case she had been working on. Just as she reached a quiet intersection, the sudden flash of red and blue lights in her rearview mirror jolted her out of her thoughts. A quick glance confirmed her fears. A police cruiser was tailing her, signaling for her to pull over. Confused but compliant, Tasha eased her car to the side of the road, her mind racing. What could this be about? I wasn't speeding, and everything's in order. The cruiser stopped behind her, and two uniformed officers stepped out. Officer Carter, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a stern expression, and Officer Mason, shorter but equally imposing, wearing a scowl that seemed permanent. They moved with the deliberate authority of officers who believed they were always in control. Tasha rolled down her window as Carter approached her vehicle. "License and registration," he barked, his tone cold and clipped. No greeting, no explanation. Tasha, ever calm under pressure, nodded and reached for her documents. "Of course, officer. May I ask what this is about?" Carter ignored her question, taking the documents and examining them with exaggerated scrutiny. He leaned closer, peering at her through the window. "Out-of-state plates," he muttered to Mason, loud enough for Tasha to hear. "Probably up to no good." Mason chuckled darkly, standing a few feet behind Carter. "What brings you to our town, ma'am?" he asked, his tone laced with suspicion. Tasha maintained her composure. "I'm on my way home from work," she replied evenly. Carter raised an eyebrow, flipping her license over as though searching for a hidden clue. "And what kind of work do you do?" "Government work," Tasha answered vaguely. She saw no need to elaborate unless absolutely necessary. Carter's smirk widened, and he handed her license to Mason. "Government work," he repeated mockingly. "That's vague. You got something to hide?" Tasha's patience began to wear thin, but she remained composed. "No, officer. I've answered your questions." "Not good enough," Carter snapped, leaning closer. "Why are you in this neighborhood? Seems out of the way for someone like you." The insinuation in his words wasn't lost on Tasha. She took a steadying breath, her hands resting calmly on the steering wheel. "Is there a specific reason you pulled me over?" she asked, her voice firm but respectful. Carter straightened, his expression hardening. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. Tasha hesitated, her instincts warning her of the potential dangers. Still, she knew better than to resist outright. "Am I being detained?" she asked, meeting his gaze directly. Carter's smirk turned into a scowl. "Step out of the car, ma'am, or we'll make this a lot harder for you." Reluctantly, Tasha unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out, keeping her hands visible. She knew the game they were playing, and she had no intention of giving them any excuse to escalate. Carter gestured for her to stand by the hood of her car, while Mason moved toward the vehicle's interior. "We're going to take a look," Mason said, as he began rifling through her belongings. "You don't have my consent to search the car," Tasha stated firmly, watching Mason's every move. "We don't need your consent," Carter shot back. "Your car, your behavior, it's suspicious enough for us to check." Tasha's jaw tightened. She knew her rights, and she knew they were overstepping. but she also knew arguing further could escalate the situation dangerously. Mason continued rummaging through her car, pulling out her laptop bag and personal belongings. "This bag looks fancy," Mason remarked, holding it up. "What's someone like you doing with something like this?" Tasha's patience was nearly at its breaking point. She met Mason's gaze coolly. "I don't see how that's relevant." Her calm defiance seemed to irritate them further. "You've got quite the attitude for someone in trouble," Carter sneered. "You think you're above the law?" "I think I know my rights," Tasha replied evenly, her eyes steady on Carter's. Mason rifled through her bag, and his hand froze as he pulled out a small leather case. He flipped it open, and his eyes widened. Carter," he said, his voice suddenly shaky. "You need to see this." Carter snatched the case from Mason and read its contents. His face paled as he registered the words, "Special Agent Tasha Williams, Federal Bureau of Investigation." For a brief moment, neither officer moved, their confidence evaporating in the face of the revelation. Tasha remained silent, her gaze unwavering as she waited for their next move. The shift in power had begun, and she was ready to seize it. The silence that followed Mason's discovery was deafening. Carter stared at the FBI badge, his usual bravado replaced by uncertainty. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Mason took a cautious step back, suddenly unsure of his footing. Tasha stood calmly, her gaze unwavering as she observed their reaction. Inside, her heart was pounding, but years of FBI training had taught her to stay composed under pressure. She waited, knowing the next move was critical. Ma'am?" Carter finally stammered, his voice devoid of its earlier hostility. "Why didn't you mention this?" Tasha raised an eyebrow. "Mention what? That I'm an FBI agent? Or that you've been unlawfully harassing me for the past 20 minutes? Mason looked at Carter, his expression a mix of fear and pleading. "Maybe we should, let her go," he mumbled. "Let her go?" Tasha repeated sharply, her voice cutting through the tense air. "After everything you just put me through?" "No, Officer Mason. It's not that simple." Carter tried to regain his composure, straightening his posture and forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding here. We were just doing our job, ensuring public safety." "Ensuring public safety?" Tasha echoed, her tone icy. "By pulling over an innocent driver, conducting an illegal search, and making baseless accusations. That's quite the interpretation of your duties." Mason shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward their cruiser as if considering a quick escape. Carter, however, wasn't ready to give up so easily. "Look, Agent Williams," he said, emphasizing her title as if it would smooth things over, "we had no way of knowing who you were. From our perspective, the situation looked suspicious." Tasha took a step closer, her calm exterior giving way to controlled anger. "Suspicious," she said. "You mean the color of my skin, paired with out-of-state plates, was enough for you to assume I was a criminal? Let's not pretend this was about anything other than your prejudice." Carter's face flushed, and Mason visibly recoiled. "That's not fair," Carter muttered. "We don't profile." "Don't you?" Tasha challenged, crossing her arms. "Because your actions today say otherwise. Tell me, officers, would you have treated me the same way if I looked different? If I were wearing a suit and tie instead of casual clothes? If I drove a luxury car instead of a sedan?" Neither man responded. The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. Tasha let the silence linger, forcing them to confront the truth they were so desperate to deny. After a long pause, Mason spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're sorry, Agent Williams. We made a mistake." Tasha fixed him with a piercing stare. "You didn't just make a mistake," she said firmly. "You abused your power, you disrespected my rights, and you thought you could get away with it because you assumed I was powerless." Carter opened his mouth to argue, but Tasha silenced him with a sharp look. "Save it!" she snapped. "I've heard enough excuses for one day." By now, a small crowd had begun to gather at a safe distance, drawn by the flashing lights and the tension in the air. A few onlookers held up their phones, recording the interaction. Tasha noticed, but didn't let it distract her. If anything, the added scrutiny only strengthened her resolve. "This isn't over," she continued, her voice steady and commanding. "You think your badge gives you the right to harass people without consequence? Think again. I have your names, your badge numbers, and every detail of this encounter. Rest assured, this will be reported." Mason visibly paled, and Carter's confident facade crumbled further. "Look," Carter began, his tone more desperate now. "We don't need to escalate this. Let us make it right." "Make it right?" Tasha repeated incredulously. "You think a half-hearted apology erases what just happened? What about the countless others who don't have the means to stand up to you? Who holds you accountable then?" Carter looked as though he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. Mason, meanwhile, had taken a step back, his gaze darting nervously between Tasha and the growing crowd. At that moment, one of the onlookers stepped forward, a middle-aged woman with a determined expression. "Is everything okay here, ma'am?" she asked, holding up her phone to show that she had been recording. Tasha turned to her and nodded. "Thank you. Everything is under control." The woman gave Carter and Mason a pointed look before stepping back into the crowd. Her presence was a stark reminder to the officers that their actions were being watched, not just by Tasha, but by the public as well. Tasha turned her attention back to the two officers. "Here's what's going to happen," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You're going to return every item you took from my car, apologize, and leave. I'll decide later whether this incident warrants further action. And believe me, I'll be watching to ensure this doesn't happen again." Carter and Mason scrambled to comply, returning her belongings with shaking hands. "We're sorry, Agent Williams," Mason mumbled, his eyes downcast. "We truly are," Carter added, though his voice lacked sincerity. "Don't apologize to me," Tasha said coldly. "Apologize to every person you've treated this way who didn't have the power to hold you accountable." With that, she climbed back into her car, her movements deliberate and controlled. She closed the door, started the engine, and waited as the two officers retreated to their cruiser. They drove off in silence, their humiliation evident. As Tasha pulled back onto the road, she felt a mix of emotions: relief that the encounter had ended without physical harm, frustration at the abuse of power she had endured, and determination to ensure justice for herself and others like her. She knew this incident was just one of many, but it strengthened her resolve to keep fighting for accountability and change. As Tasha continued driving, her hands remained steady on the wheel, but her mind raced. The encounter had left her both rattled and resolute. She had been trained for high-stress situations, but this was personal, a vivid reminder of the systemic issues she faced, even as someone sworn to uphold the law at the highest level. The evening sky darkened, and her phone buzzed in the passenger seat. Pulling over at a nearby gas station, she checked the screen to find a text from a colleague. "Tasha, are you okay? Saw a clip of you on social media. Looks like it went viral." Her stomach dropped. Social media? She immediately opened her browser and found the video. A bystander had uploaded the entire interaction, capturing every tense word and the officer's dramatic change in demeanor when her FBI badge came to light. Within hours, the video had spread like wildfire, accompanied by hashtags calling for accountability and justice. She watched herself on the screen, her calm yet assertive tone holding the officers accountable. The comments were a mix of outrage, admiration, and questions about the system that allowed such behavior to persist. One comment caught her eye. If she wasn't FBI, how differently would this have ended? The weight of the question lingered. It wasn't the first time she had thought about it, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. Tasha knew she had to act, not just for herself, but for the countless others who lacked the power or platform to challenge such treatment. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Carter and Mason sat in the locker room, the tension between them palpable. The silence was only broken by the occasional beep of Mason's phone as notifications flooded in. "This is bad," Mason finally muttered, scrolling through his screen. "The videos everywhere." Carter leaned against the lockers, his jaw clenched. "It's not that bad. People will forget in a few days. They always do." Mason gave him a pointed look. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't going away. She's FBI, Carter. FBI. You think she's just going to let this slide?" Carter scowled, but his silence was telling. Mason continued, his voice growing frantic. "And what if she files a report? Or worse, what if the Bureau gets involved? This could end our careers." Carter slammed his fist against the locker, the metallic clang echoing in the room. "Calm down. We'll handle it." "Handle it how?" Mason shot back. "Apologizing didn't cut it out there, and it sure as hell isn't going to cut it now." The door creaked open, and their captain stepped in, his expression grim. "Officers Carter, Mason!" he barked, his tone sharp. "In my office. Now." After calming herself and finishing her drive home, Tasha sat at her kitchen table, laptop open and phone beside her. The video had racked up thousands of views in just a few hours, and messages of support poured in from friends, colleagues, and strangers alike. But Tasha wasn't interested in being the center of a viral moment. Her focus was on ensuring that this incident led to real consequences and, hopefully, change. She drafted a formal report detailing the events of the traffic stop, sticking to the facts and avoiding emotional language. She highlighted the illegal search of her vehicle, the officer's unprofessional behavior, and the clear bias that had motivated their actions. Once satisfied, she submitted the report to both the FBI's Internal Affairs Division and the local police department's Oversight Board. Next, Tasha reached out to a trusted journalist she had worked with in the past. While she couldn't share every detail due to confidentiality, she provided enough context to shed light on the systemic issues at play. "This isn't just about me," she explained during the call. "This is about every person who doesn't have a badge or a platform to protect them." The journalist promised to follow up, and Tasha ended the call feeling a glimmer of hope. She knew the road ahead would be long, but she was ready to see it through. At the precinct, Carter and Mason sat stiffly in the captain's office. The air was thick with tension as the captain held up his phone, the now infamous video playing on the screen. He paused it mid-sentence, the image frozen on Carter's face. "Do you have any idea what kind of storm you've unleashed?" the captain demanded, his voice a low growl. "This video is everywhere. The department is under fire. The mayor's office is calling, and the FBI is breathing down our necks." "Captain, Carter began, but the captain cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Save it," he snapped. "Do you know how much damage control this is going to take? This isn't just about optics. You violated protocol, you conducted an illegal search, and you treated a federal agent, an FBI agent, like a criminal. If she decides to press this, you're looking at suspension, maybe worse." Mason fidgeted in his chair, his face pale. We didn't know she was FBI," he muttered. The captain's glare could have cut through steel. "And that makes it okay? What if she wasn't? What if she was just some ordinary citizen? Would you be sitting here justifying your actions, or would you still think you were in the right?" Neither officer answered. The captain leaned forward, his tone deadly serious. "You've embarrassed this department and eroded public trust. Consider yourselves on thin ice. Internal Affairs will be conducting a full investigation, and I expect full cooperation." Days later, Tasha received an update from the Oversight Board. The department had launched an investigation, and Carter and Mason had been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. It wasn't the sweeping reform she hoped for, but it was a step in the right direction. The journalist she had contacted published a piece that went viral, using her story as a lens to examine broader issues of racial profiling and police accountability. Public pressure mounted, sparking conversations within the community and calls for change. Thank you for watching Stories That Heal. Today's story reminds us of the importance of standing up for what's right and the courage it takes to challenge injustice. What stood out most to you? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an inspiring tale. See you next time, and remember, every story has the power to heal.